Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says an expanded offensive against Hamas will be intensive. This after his security cabinet approved plans that may include seizing the entire Gaza Strip. Netanyahu said Israeli troops, which already control about a third of the territory, will capture more land until, quote, all the goals of the war are reached. Officials have said the expansion of operations will not begin, though, until after a visit by US President Donald Trump later this month. Netanyahu did say, though, that on Monday it would involve the evacuation of most of Gaza's population for what he called the Palestinians' own protection.
We decided on a powerful operation in Gaza. This was the recommendation of the Chief of Staff to, as he said, defeat Hamas. Gaza's population will be moved for its own protection.
For more on this story, we can cross to France 24's Noga Tarnopolsky in Jerusalem. Noga, what can you tell us maybe what this decision implies?
Thank you, Karis. For now, it implies a very, very dramatic statement. And it's interesting that the quote you chose from the Prime Minister is one that lays the responsibility or the blame fully on the Chief of Staff of the Army for this decision. That is clearly a political maneuver on the part of Netanyahu, who has been pushing for this plan, a kind of reoccupation, reinvasion, an expanded military operation in Gaza against the advice of the army. So Israel is facing a mini war inside of its own borders because the army warned the cabinet out loud and clearly that the lives of the Israeli hostages in Gaza will be at risk. They issued a whole series of very grim projections of what could happen to the Israeli hostages in Gaza if the government does move ahead with this plan, which is a plan chosen and decided upon by the cabinet. That said, in a very strange maneuver, the cabinet voted on this plan and immediately announced they're not undertaking it, just like they're not yet calling up all of the tens of thousands of reservists who will be needed for this plan. They announced it, and then they said they're not going to do it before the end of President Donald Trump's visit to the region, which begins next week. It's a visit that does not include Israel. In fact, Donald Trump, among other Gulf states, is going to be visiting Qatar, the top sponsor of Hamas. So there is a certain possibility. I'm not saying the government doesn't intend to follow through. I assume it does at some point. But there also is a possibility this is a way of trying to keep some of Donald Trump's attention on Israel while he visits a whole slew of other countries in the region.
And so how are people in Israel and around the world reacting to this plan?
Very, very badly, Karis. In fact, there have been condemnations from, except for the United States, really the whole world, the United Nations, the European Union, France, Pacific nations, and in Israel, the response has been devastating. Important to remember that the government is acting against the clear will of a majority of Israelis. More than 70% of Israelis want this war over. They want the hostages back in the framework of a deal, not of a military operation that threatens their lives. There were thousands of people again on the streets last night, and the family members, especially of those hostages considered still to be alive, hostages who we have seen in really horrific hostage videos released by Hamas just in recent days, issued truly shattering statements accusing the Israeli government of having chosen to join hands with Hamas in the murder of their children.
All right, Noga Tarnopolsky, thank you very much for that update from Jerusalem.